data that we are collecting. And then, of course, again, there are different approaches to how we structure our work, and it really depends, of course, what you are working on, right? If this is just an article, well, I shouldn't say just an article, but I hope you get my point, like book is something else than article. So for example, when I was writing my PhD, for me, it was really important to have the idea what I have in every chapter, because when you write only chapter for edited volume or article for a journal or special collection, it's something else than when you think more in terms of a book. And for my PhD, it was really important to think what I do in every chapter, so that when I write chapter 3, let's say, it will not influence what I did in chapter 1. I hope you get my point. And again, people decide to do it differently. Some people that I know write their thesis in last year, or they have division into chapters and write bits and pieces in every chapter. I mean, for me, what really worked, but again, it's very individual, right? It's very embodied, it's very situated, was to have the general idea about chapters, but then write one after the other. So in a sense, there was always a red thread, but they existed on their own, so to speak. And that gave me also peace of mind and a bit of relaxed attitude, because I didn't have to worry that if in my chapter number 5 I write something, I will have to rewrite chapter 2 or chapter 1. So I was keeping in my mind the red thread, and I hope also in my chapters, but at the same time they could stand on their own. So that was my writing strategy, to also kind of ease my anxiety with writing. Now, ta-da, moving to writing motivation and emotions. I mean, writing for me was always very challenging, I must say. And I was actually trying to find out why writing is so challenging, why writing enriches me, but also drains me and makes me exhausted. So when trying to kind of like crack it and nail it down for myself, I also understood that it quite often makes me so tired or exhausted, because actually it makes me question my ways of thinking. So that writing becomes a conversation with myself. So whatever I think, I write, and then the text looks back at me and verify my thoughts. And it becomes sometimes extremely frustrating moment. So I haven't been really a happy writer, just jumping and writing. Rather, it could be a grumpy and rocky process. And digging into that, I realized that that could be one of the reasons, that it makes me question my way of thinking, but also that it's a process of self-discovery. And I would even dare to say self-therapy, so to speak. So I once wrote a text about writing as a desire. When I was trying to think that writing, we write, of course, for something, right? To produce a book, to produce a PhD thesis, to produce article, to produce chapter. But I also realized that writing in itself, like this Deleuzian desire, so desire understood as production, that it also enriches me. So it can drain me because it questions me. It's the self-discovery, self-therapy, but also it enriches me precisely because it questions my way of thinking and becomes a process of self-discovery and self-therapy. So of course, the final product is important. If I can use that word product, forgive me for bringing a bit maybe of neoliberal shadows here. But at the same time, when I approach writing as a desiring process, as the process of self-discovery and self-therapy, I realized that even if I don't reach the final project, the time is never wasted. So the writing in itself becomes an exciting, draining, challenging, but nonetheless exciting journey. And of course, we are all exhausted by writing. We are exhausted by writing also because of the content we are dealing with. And this is also what Charlene and Demet asked me to think a bit about. Like the content, especially in gender studies that we are dealing with, goes under the skin, touches the nerves. So I always, in the moments of when it's really difficult, I always ask myself also, why do I do it? And then I'm thinking that I do it for the audience. I do it for my informants because I love working with empirical material gathered during interviews. And I try, though sometimes for sure I fail, to write for change. So I write also for degree. Well, I wrote for degree. I also for jobs, as we know, to maintain our jobs, we need to write, that's true. But I think that there is always something more. So like writing for the audience, writing for change, but also for that something more. And I think that this is really crucial to answer to ourselves, why do we do that? Because I think, that's again my situated knowledge, curious what you think about it, that what is really important to maintain the process of writing is passion and stubbornness. So when the stubbornness is dying, the passion, can give you a bit of wings, forgive the truism. And when the passion is dying, the stubbornness can somehow, turn the wheels. So I think that answer that we sometimes need to answer to ourselves, why the heck do we do that actually? For jobs, of course, important. For degrees, important. But for what else? For change? For challenging other people's way of thinking? Or for what? So that what I think is really important to think about. And maybe now what I will tell you, truism again, but nonetheless, I haven't found better answer what to do when we really drain, when we really exhausted, how to deal with our emotions when the content is really heavy on us. Because as I know, as you know, we write about sensitive, tough, challenging topics. And I think let's never underestimate the community, the academic, activist, non-academic, activist spaces where we can recharge. I think community cannot be ever underestimated. So it's not only, me, myself, and a computer, but really trying to establish, to find, to build community spaces when we can really recharge. And of course, find those places if they are not there. Create those places. And I also think that what is absolutely needed in those community spaces is respect, kindness, and generosity. We move from the critic to constructive critic, but sometimes I'm afraid there is a bit too much of it. Again, you may agree, you may disagree with me, but I think what is really necessary in times now, post-pandemic, now war on the Ukraine, right? Climate problems, etc., that we really need respect, kindness, and generosity, because it not only sustains us, but it also can help with our writing. Shortly to work-life balance. I mean, something extremely problematic, very difficult. I don't know where you are located. I don't know your genealogies, your histories, but of course, so it's a bit difficult, of course, to speak about it. I know that some may have better contracts, some may have contracts that you really, maybe your research is only like what, 20%. So again, it all depends, of course, where you're located. Again, it depends on your life histories, your genealogies. But I think that because of that, we need to remember about embodiment. So respect to our own bodies And not in that sense of, again, neoliberal eat apple and exercise, that then put all responsibility on you, of course. So respect to our bodies, but at the same time remembering that we are embedded and embodied in certain structures. And the thing is that, I mean, again, depending on your geopolitical locations, those structures are more easier or more difficult to challenge. What I've been trying to do, over my trip through Poland, Netherlands, and Sweden, is to indeed learn to say no to certain tasks if I can. And I actually got my first, so now we have 2022, I got permanent work after struggles in 2018. So it's only like 4 years that I have a permanent position. Why I'm saying this is that, through all the years, of course, it was pushing myself more and more, in a sense, to get the job. And again, there were different reasons why I wanted to do that. And why I'm saying this is that I know that it's very difficult to say no to certain tasks. I know that it's very difficult to keep that work-life balance. But nonetheless, I think that if we can, we should, and try to find strategies that can help us. I mean, like recently, at least at Linköping University, what we try to do with our colleagues is that, I mean, like we try to also do collective work. So again, depends where you are and what is possible. We try to share the tasks. So for example, when we write article, we also try to write it together. If somebody teaches more, then that person writes less, for example. And again, I know that you can say, well, this is not applicable in my situation, and I fully understand you. So this is also something we can reflect in the Q&A. So what can be done? What kind of strategies we can work on to keep work-life balance? Because we keep on saying this over and over, but not much has been changed, unfortunately. But I also think that what needs to be done is a resistance to discourse that glorifies working overtime, because quite often that discourse of, you know what I mean, oh my God, I'm working during the weekends, oh my goodness, I cannot take the summer off or something like that. I think we need to resist to that discourse, because it becomes some sort of glorification almost of working overtime. But I know one of the most challenging things to do. But again, even if it's tough and if it's difficult, you know, I ask myself question, why do I do it? Why do I bother with all this amount of work and writing? And again, answering this question, I think is really crucial to sustain and maintain ourselves, our embedded subjects, but also to maintain our writing. And sometimes maybe, and please don't hate me for this, it's time to reconsider. It's time to challenge and change. But again, it's up to us to decide how we want to continue. And the last thing, because I don't want to take that much time, and then we can have more time in the Q&A, is a reflection on writing itself. I mean, what helps me again to make writing a bit less challenging, or what I call a terror of a white page. When you just open it, the whole page is black, you know, it's white and it's just blinking, the cursor is blinking, waiting for our intervention. So I try, in those moments, I try to think about writing as something that it's all about connections. So that writing as an outcome of connections, in a sense that in our writing, it's everything that we've experienced, so to speak, that writing becomes some sort of a living map of our embodied and embedded subjectivities, so to speak. Then I always think about writing as forging connections. So not only outcome of connections, but also forging connections. So forging connections between our thoughts, ideas, experiences, or between books or whatever we've encountered, whatever touched us, but also as forging connections to the audience. Because even when we write, and it can be a very lonely moment, I mean, you never know what will come across your work. And for me, it's really important to keep that in mind, even if I don't have the audience in front of me. But then I'm thinking about all the texts that I've read that touched me. And I'm guessing that the person who was writing had no clue that Edyta will take it and read it. And at the same time, it did something. So I think it's really important to keep that in mind when we feel sometimes lonely or exhausted in front of our screens. But also like writing that exactly does something to the others, but also it does something to us. I mean, for me, writing is never detached from me. Even if it's in front of me on the screen, so to speak, ontologically speaking, it's still a part of me. It forms connection with myself. It's a dialogue with myself, but also with everything else that populates and lives in my body and head. And writing as connections, thinking about writing as connections can help us also to overcome the blockages, you know, the moment when we really feel that we cannot write. And I think that this is again the moment that we should, when we have this blockage, that this is the moment we should try to connect to books, to ideas, to events, and to others, and also use strategies of, I have like usually 2 strategies of automatic writing, so that you do not try to, you know, construct perfect sentences, perfect paragraphs. You just sit and pour your thoughts and you write. And I guess that you know about it. Probably some of you tried already. But this kind of, you know, automatic writing really helps to overcome somehow the desire for perfect text from the start. Usually it's messy. And it's good that it's messy. And I think that this automatic writing, you know, throws the mess, and then later, you know, the editing, the looking for the red thread can give it more coherence. And also drawing your ideas. I don't know whether you do that, but usually when I try to think and write and think and write, because it's always, you know, like reciprocal, so to speak, process, I drew things. So I take like a big, you know, piece of paper and put things and try to see how they connect. So this is one also of the strategy to think about writing as connection, but also somehow to overcome the blockage, the moment that we feel like, oh my God, I can't do it anymore. And then looking how they connect. And the last thing that I want to say, because Charlene and Demet are doing the collection of different materials, and I can put it into the chat, is that Nina Lykke, with whom she's a professor emerita from Linköping University, but she's been, you know, doing a lot on writing. And Nina has developed, together with other scholars, lots of exercises that can actually boost our writing potential, mobilize our neurons, mobilize our bodies. And she and others, I mean, put it into the book called Writing Academic Text Differently, Intersectional Feminist Methodologies and the Playful Art of Writing. So if you wish, I can put it in a second to the chat, and so that you can have it for your own references. Ta-dams! That would be me. So sorry for not having PowerPoint, but I usually have this stream of thoughts, but I have my notes. So if necessary, Demet or Charlene, you know, if you want it for some references, then of course I can edit it. So thank you so much for your attention. In a second, I will put it to the chat. And now I think to you, Giovanna, right? Because we have the break and Q&A later. So thank you so much for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Edyta. This was really a fantastic talk. I'm specific.
Oh, thank you.
I was really impressed the way you you define writing, because I know that writing is a process, but it's very easy to forget it when we are stuck. So thanks for this, you know, lovely and crafty description.
Thank you. It was pouring from my embodied subject experience, so to speak, with the writing process.
Well, lovely. I'm also very glad to hear that we can be grumpy. We are allowed to be grumpy during writing. So it's very nice to hear as well.
Don't come close when I have a blockage. Something like that.
I'm the same. Yeah. I'm the same. So I'll give the floor to Giovanna now. Giovanna, yeah, you can start whenever you are ready.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. I always feel at home when a gender is doing things. And thank you to all the participants. Thank you, Edyta, because she said a lot of things that resonates with me. Sorry, I have a PowerPoint. Because when I start thinking about the task that Demeter Charlene gave it to me, since it was very much related to my personal experience, I started to think and write in Italian. And this is something that matters, in my opinion, because when I had to rethink and write everything in English, first of all, I needed some more structured. So that's the reason for the PowerPoint. But I had, and I have the impression that since I'm writing again and I'm reflecting again on my thoughts in English, that is not my mother language, in a way it looks like more detached from the speech that I will give in Italian. So forgive me for this detachment that you can realize sometime. And here you find the PowerPoint. You have to habilitate me, I guess. Give me the power.
Yeah, I'm doing this now. So normally you can trade now, Giovanna.
Yes, yes. Thank you a lot. Yes. So this is me. You have to picture. Can you see it?
No, Giovanna, we can't. Well, at least I cannot.
No, I cannot either.
Sorry, there is some. Now?
It's just like you had started screen share. Oh, yes, fantastic. Yes.
Okay. So this is me. Two pictures of me. It's the same person. The first one is an interview that I was giving for when I was nominated Rector's Delegate for Equal Opportunities at my university. And the second one is when we organized the first Pride in my city. It's a small city in the south of Italy. The journal is the same. This is one of the reasons why I chose these two pictures. Of course, I guess there is much more beyond that, but yeah, this is for another talk, presentation, whatever. And as Edyta said, this is situated knowledge. So my experience, again, is related to a specific geopolitical context, as well as also the specific policies of the Italian university context. I have a permanent position since 2006. And this makes a difference, but also makes a difference regarding my writing strategy, my planning of writings. The fact that, for example, I decide that I don't want to have any career improvement. This is a decision that I could do it starting from my position of privilege, of course. This is to say that when we talk about tips and tricks, there are no tips and tricks that fit all. I just want to share with you the struggle that as a feminist I encountered with traditional forms of academic writing. And I'd like to give you some, I hope, simple and useful advice in the meanwhile. So for the past 25 years, more or less, I found myself focused on the intersection of feminism and academic writing, institutions, and activism. Nowadays, we celebrate a greater inclusion in the academy within the fields of gender studies and feminist studies and queer studies. We have seen a successful evolution of academic content in this area, but we have not necessarily demanded that the form of our academic work undergo the same changes. I'm not ignoring the changes that have been made to traditional forms of academic inquiry. However, my impression is that academic writing as a method has not undergone the same interrogation. I define academic writing as the expository argument-based text adherent to disciplinary conventions and performing for an audience. Thinking of this presentation, I recall some of my students' questions about their struggles with academic writing doing gender and feminist studies. Though some felt insecurities more than others, they all shared the same concerns. How can I best approach writing? What voice should I use? Are there conventions I should follow? What's the best way to incorporate other different sources into my work? There are hundreds of writing and style manuals, from classics to more recent ones. This is maybe one, not the best one, but the one I'm emotionally attached to, because this is the one I used when I was writing my master thesis. It's Umberto Eco, How to Write a Thesis. It has been translated in English in 2015. Eco reminds me that it's important that we decide to whom to write. We must decide how to write. And of course, it's a very difficult question. There are no exhaustive rules. If there were, we would all be writers. A recommendation from Eco is that you rewrite your thesis many times, if you have time, if you have the opportunity, that you take on another writing project before embarking on your master thesis or PhD thesis, because writing is a question of training. Some general suggestions are, do not write long sentences. This is specific for Italians. This is quite a difficult task for us. Begin new paragraphs often. Of course, you can do it when logical and necessary and when the pace of text requires it, but the more you do it, the better. Write everything that comes into your head, especially in the first draft. You may notice that you get carried away with your inspiration and you lose track of the center of your topic. In this case, you can identify the digression, or you can put each in a note or an appendix. Your thesis exists for the outset, not to show the breadth of your knowledge. Use the advisor as a guinea pig. You must ensure that the advisor reads the first chapter, and eventually all the chapters, far in advance of the deadline. Reactions are very useful. If the advisor is busy or lazy, ask a friend. Ask if they understand what you're writing. Do not play the solitary genius. Do not insist on beginning with the first chapter. Maybe you have more documentation on chapter 5. Start there, with the nonchalance of someone who has already worked on the previous chapters. You will gain confidence, and naturally your working table of contents will anchor you and will serve as a hypothesis that guides you. I chose this general suggestion because they are the ones that I still follow after 30 years. So we had some rules, we had some suggestions, but of course rules are meant to be broken. And I admit that I broke my good share. At the same time, I'm aware of the cardinal rules of academic research that are connected to writing. We know that how difficult it is to develop a research question and then write. My experience is that it's important to both know the rules and when to break them to best suit your needs and voice. So it's important to learn and understand the rules in order to mold them to our own use. Producing an academic paper, essay, or books is certainly not the same as being told to share our opinion, have a conversation, debate a given point to prove our stance is correct. Almost all writers who seek to produce academic writing, at least at the beginning, experience challenges and discomforts due to the fact that there are many points of form and style that the academic writing currently demands, such as methodology, disciplinary jargon, format, etc. Exploring this tension and discomfort at both the individual and institutional level is a part of mapping how to foster and create different forms that allows for the expression of feminist ideas. Academic writing, as I said before, is not the same as being asked opinion. It's the craft of molding our argument to suit a particular form. Within the system of higher education, the hierarchy of established academics sustains this production and the nature of the work produced within. All new entrants into the system are expected to comprehend and continue the production of this discourse. Here I try to reshuffle a bit the cardinal steps to discuss some of the issues that I find more difficult and important. I previously posited that academic style is not a natural expression of producing knowledge. It comes into being through the performance of academic style in writing, making the writer a part of the academic discourse. Abandoning all conventions or constructs is difficult, but a level of awareness about the conventions we employ is necessary to evolve our work. Of course, no performance occurs without an audience, and the specific nature of the relationship between the writer-performer and the reader-audience is important when considering writers' struggle to exist as independent self within academic writing. This performance is today even more vulnerable to metrics of success that are established by universities, such, for example, the impact factors, rather than the metrics, in brackets, that may be more reflective of feminist goals, such inclusivity, engagement with community partners, calling out discrimination to promote social justice. Conforming to notion of academic style is important in order to be heard or read. But while we focus upon who will read, we might easily lose track of what brought us to the page. Eventually, the anticipation of comments, critiques, scrutiny of our work might effectively discipline our work. My experience, for example, at academic conferences, sometimes we attack others and anticipate being attacked as well. In order to avoid this discursive violence, we might silence our own voices for hearing the audience. Many times, less in feminist spaces, but even there, the task of academic inquiry is seen primarily to be exposing weaknesses and faults in another scholarship. We are led to the assumption that it's more important to prove others' work wrong than acknowledging others' contribution. This is of particular concern for feminist writers, at least it's a particular concern for me, as we cannot hope to connect across difference without first making ourselves open to the reality of difference in first place. As a consequence, another cardinal rule of academic writing is citing prior work in the field, or using others' work because we don't want any holes in our own for overlooking obvious experts. As a result, we might lean too heavily upon others' words or simply insert them into text without fully engaging with them. Here I want to focus on feminist citation practice. We have been told several times that citations are just to avoid plagiarism, but citation is much more. They can determine who participates in research, how they participate, and measure how they are rewarded. Being cited less means you have less credit for your work and less social or academic capital. And if you go into academia, this is so important for your career. Even more importantly, citations reflect how knowledge is reproduced and remembered. A reference here is Sarah Ahmed, and I want to quickly point out her introduction to her citation practices rather than summarize them. This is a book that most of you probably know. In this book, I adopt a strict citation policy. I do not cite any white man. By white man, I'm referring to an institution. Instead, I cite those who have contributed to the intellectual genealogy of feminism and anti-racism, including work that has been too quickly, in my view, cast aside or left behind. Work that lays out other paths we can call the sidelines, created by not following the official paths laid out by disciplines. These paths might have become fainter from not being traveled upon, so we might work harder to find them. We might be willful just to keep them going by not going the way we have been directed. My citation policy has given me more room to attend to those feminists who came before me. Citation is feminist memory. Citation is how we acknowledge our debt to those who came before, those who helped us find our way when the way was obscured because we deviated from the path we were taught to follow. In this book, I cite feminists of color who have contributed to the project of naming and dismantling the institution of patriarchal whiteness. I consider this book primarily as a contribution to feminists of color scholarship and activism. This body of work is where I feel most at home, where I find energy as well as resources. Citation can be feminist bricks. They are the materials from which we create our dwellings. My citation policy has affected the kind of house I have built. And this is something I firmly believe and I try to use in my work. If I have to imagine a new type of academic writing, I envision a greater sense of conversation among the various voices in a given academic paper. Instead of going through the motions of a homage to a given author or theorist or tearing them down, we can choose which words to cherish amongst our own, show how well their thoughts play with another's. I slowly started acknowledging the impact that feminist thinkers, not necessarily the ones I feel closer to my approach, have had on my field of work. It was only through time and effort that I was able to recognize this work as an inheritance of mine and not something to which I needed to prove my superiority. Again, reshuffling. Students often ask, can I insert my point of view here? What about my personal experience? Sitting to write a paper becomes a hugely performative and repressive task if the writer is not breathing and feelings and emotion are hidden below our reason and intellectual thoughts. Our ability to think coexists with our ability to feel, and the generation of an argument for a paper relies on both, though each particular writer will have their own balance of the two. To write so that it feels good, so that it feels right to me, became essential to my feminist academic argumentation. A piece of advice here: there is no topic more feminist than others. You can still study the mainstream without being mainstreamed, because it's not the topic that defines you, but the approach and the methodology you use. That's, of course, my experience and my opinion. I've cited some characteristics associated with mainstream academic writing. I recall them: harsh argument, laundry list of works cited without a sense of community between writers, reason free from emotion. However, there is a rich feminist scholarship now that is increasingly used with a canonical frequency in classrooms. This is proof that one need not to follow all the rules to play the game or become a key player. The desire to connect across differences is essential to me and to feminist writers. Some can understand feminist studies as the institutionalization of the feminist movement. I posit here that there is always a tension between inside and outside. Of course, it can be difficult to push for grassroots change and inclusivity from a position within institutions, because institutions are often reticent and reproducing discriminations. I learned that for an over-confrontation, it's firstly necessary to build the trust among us, and it might be a long and painful journey made of a mutual recognition. Feminists in academy must amplify the writing of others, different from themselves. I turn to Lord the Master who will never dismantle the Master's house here, though I disagree with her slightly, because my experience is that I did not reject all the master's tools, but added and changed tools of my own in the building of a new house that I think we might all share. And my PhD thesis was with this title, "The Master Tool Will Never Dismantle the Master House." I was researching on gender budget. It's a very boring topic and very mainstream. So writing critically, my opinion, with and from multiple informed sources is maybe the single most common trademark for the kind of writing and thinking that is expected of us in the academy. However, this does not mean that you write about things you don't care about. That you write as if you sound like an encyclopedia, that you omit your own voice and perspective, that you cannot be creative and energetic. This not means that you cannot write outside the box and that you cannot have some fun with it. So everything looks fine now, as long as our writing flows freely, but as also Edyta said, then we have the block, then we are stuck. I would suggest an exercise when you're stuck. Take a page you're writing and turn it over on the desk and use just your voice to tell yourself or possibly a friend or a colleague about the thesis and ideas within the text. You might be unsure of the words without the safety net of seeing them printed out. Most of the time, what we say about our work is very different from what we have written the night or the month before. This exercise usually highlights how we can be disconnected from our work during its writing. This might allow to understand not only where we stood on the issues at hand in the paper, but also what changes could be made to improve our writing process. This exercise might also reveal another reason why we write, to be understood by others. You might learn you have not written what you have in your oral conversation, or that is not clear enough, and you might become suddenly reinvested in papers you might be bored to death with. I have to admit I'm a very slow writer. One of the inspiration about this is from this article that highlights the importance of slow scholarship in terms of feminist research practices. Slow scholarship can be defined as thoughtful, reflective, and the product of rumination. It's a field testing of other ideas and our own ideas, of course. The concept was actually drawn initially from the slow food movement, which started in 1986 in Italy, as a cry for the slowing down of the pace of life to find more time to spend together. To me, the call for slow scholarship and slow writing is a response to the acceleration of academic work. The authors here argue that a slow scholarship is a feminist ethics of care, and it is about making university a place where many people, professors and students from multiple places of privilege and marginalization, can collectively and collaboratively thrive. Slow scholarship is really not just about time, but really about structures of power and inequality. And a feminist mode of slow scholarship works for deep reflexive thought, engaging research, joy in writing, and working on concepts and ideas driven by our passion. The authors in the article provide 10 suggestions on how to incorporate slow scholarship and writing into daily practices. Of these suggestions, these 4 stood out to me that are related not only to writings. First one is take into account what others don't. This means recognizing the value of collective authorship, mentorship, collaboration, community building, and activist work, and the germination of ideas. Take care. A feminist ethics of care is personal, individual, collective, and political. We might take care of ourselves before we can take care of the others, but we must take care of others. Make time to write differently. Writing is a fundamental mark we make in the world as academics and should reflect the values of making a difference. Lastly, reach for the minimum. Good enough is the new perfect. Reaching for the minimum allows for focus on quality, not quantity, and then acknowledge the need for balance in our lives. I know that slowing down is a privilege, but it's a privilege I want to use to change the academic performative routines and rules. Some other piece of advice. Writing takes time. Time that you are not using to take care of anyone or make money or take care of yourself. Writing means spending a lot of time alone, as well as a lot of time reading and listening to other people and discussing what you read out loud or in your head, in person or across the centuries, and collecting the fruits of this conversation, the ideas that bring you alive in writing. Simone de Beauvoir gave us some other suggestions, bits of advice. Write to stay sane. Writers write to find out what they think, what they believe, and what they want to communicate. Many writers cannot go a day without writing, not me, for example. Be prepared to shock. If you are going to write in an original way, you risk shocking readers. People are used to reading in certain genres and styles. Try something different. Be prepared to be novel in your approach and wait for their reactions. Let your ideas percolate. Writing isn't always done in front of the keyboard or on a piece of paper. Let yourself think about what you want to say. Agatha Christie said the best time to plan a book is while you're doing the dishes. Let your ideas percolate. It's all part of the creative process. You'll often find that what you write after a while is better than anything you jot down quickly. But always, always have a notepad handy to jot down those ideas. Writers write. You should learn the rules so you know how and when to break them. Read books on the subject, then write every day if possible. Develop a writing ritual or routine. However, fieldwork and writing are never really things we do alone. We just do not always openly acknowledge the various voices and support that go into our process of data collection and knowledge production. So also Edyta was highlighting this. We need more collaborative writing. Collaborative writing is an attempt to be more open and explicit about the many influences that permeate our writing. These influences include the communities we work with, our colleagues, and the scholars who came before us. Co-authorship can be seen as a form of feminist writing and methodology because it challenges power dynamics, promotes multiple perspectives and experiences, and emphasizes reflexivity. Writing together means writing as a community and supporting one another. It means that people who are caring for family members at home, who are lecturing and juggling many jobs, or who are working outside of academia can rely on networks to stay motivated, generate ideas, share responsibilities. It's a strategy for survival that is based on solidarity. Look out for these networks. If you cannot find one, build up yours, build up one. I've also been inspired by the groundbreaking work of the Latina feminist group. This group envisioned how the many forms of collaboration can be a mechanism of resistance and a vehicle for challenging the lack of inclusivity in academia. They emphasize the importance of a collaborative relationship through dialogue, solidarity, and friendship. Co-authorship can encompass many benefits and rewards, but it can also produce challenges, such as working through conflicts generated by different generational theoretic perspectives. This is a process that may not always have good results, or at least not always equal results for all involved. For example, as a senior scholar, I must think on how I can do things differently and push back on unethical collaboration practices that only reproduce power hierarchies. So we are going to the conclusion of my talk. Let's be honest, writing is always difficult. It never ever goes quite to plan. In fact, writing seems to actively resist careful planning attempts. Most problems with writing, in my experience, start because the research task and our life are fraught with uncertainty, which can be sorted into three categories. Foreseen uncertainties, tasks that take longer to do, resources not turning up on time, etc. In other words, the ordinary everyday stuff that happens to everyone. Unforeseen uncertainties, not anticipated, and therefore a plan B has not been formulated. Floods, earthquakes, fires, 2020, 2021. We are all there. Third one, chaotic or turbulent uncertainty. You are trying to do something so new that the project plan itself cannot be fully formulated in advance. Everything is in flux and changing throughout the project, both methods and outcomes, even the project questions, so you're writing. Problems in writing, in my experience, are often related to problems with my research. There are a number of strategies for dealing with chaotic uncertainty. I have used or recommended all of these strategies myself. Here are some. Ask yourself, is there an information gap? Can you get access to a field site, data, tools, and so on? This is where intuition and experience are both crucial. We would expect that supervisors are a good source of information on these uncertainties, but make sure you talk to a range of people who have done a similar project before. They will be able to point out the traps for new players. Try running parallel experiments, lines of inquiries, or methods to see which will work. If you're doing interviews, see if there is some document analysis that you can use to supplement your data, just in case. If you're doing experiments, aim to try multiple small ones before choosing one that has a huge time investment. Make sure you keep good records of this side exploration. Expect to do a lot of work that doesn't end up in the final writing. Doing a lot of what turns out to be redundant work is not a sign of failure. This is just research. Organize training sessions with your peers, share your writings with them, etc. Recognize that most research projects cannot be fully planned in advance, but planning, unfortunately, is still essential. Planning is a way of testing out how the project parameters you have set are working. Part of this review process is to realize what is not working. And yes, technology can help us. Here you find some tools you can use. Most of them are similar to the one that we have seen before. Don't use it all together. And this is not an excuse for not thinking and not writing. In conclusion, I realized that most of my talk was a reflection arguing if there is a prescribed form or right mode of academic writing. I do not have any answer to propose. I don't have my own version. I'm not convinced that I have provided more answer to that question in this talk. I remain unsure of what the best or most feminist academic writing might look like. What I do feel I've been able to do is to listen to my students, many of whom I've heard point out the difficulties of expressing their ideas in their work. Though I have been exceptionally lucky to be surrounded by brilliant scholars throughout my education, I have been also consistently reminded that intimidation and discomfort affect all of us who write. Feminist scholars may be especially impacted by this pressure to conform also in writing, because we often labor under an undue pressure to prove ourselves more than our other colleagues in the humanities and social sciences. A last word. Writing might emanate directly from specific, though varied, positionality. There is no shying away from the I or use of personal experience. The writer, the speaker, is a vital part of the argument and the knowledge produced. Thank you.
We can't hear you now.
Sorry, Shari.
Oh yes, now I can hear you. Excuse me.
Okay, I was saying, yeah, thank you very much, Giovanna. This was, yeah, really impressive. I specifically love the way you talk about feminist criticism and how it is related with feminist care. So this was super helpful. I have a question from the organization side. So normally we would finish this event at 5:30. So we have 15 minutes. But if our speakers agreed to finish at 5:45. So if we add 15 more minutes, maybe we can have a little, we can have this 5 minutes break that we mentioned before. But if we don't have time, we can maybe, just take the questions, whatever you prefer.
I'm sorry I talk too much.
No.
Sorry, I realized just now.
Giovanna, it's just that the time is always against, okay? That's the point. I'm fine. Also depends on the people participating, whether they want to stay a bit longer.
Lovely. It seems like, people are willing to stay 15 minutes more. So in that case, maybe we can have, as I said, 5 minutes break. Meanwhile, you can think about your questions, our participants, you can think about your questions. You can put it to the chat box if you want, or you can just raise your hand so we can give the floor to you. And we can also use this 5 minutes to have a look to Padlet, because I can see there fantastic stuff being written. There are both suggestions and challenges, dilemmas, all of this stuff. So we can, we can meet in 5 or 4 minutes. Maybe in 20 past.
So maybe we can start again. I think Giovanna is here. I don't know if Edyta is here. Great. So yeah, Giovanna asked if you could keep the Padlet and ask for feedback. I think we can of course keep it. It's great. I see that many people contributed, so thank you so much. So I just want to say again, thank you so much to Edyta and Giovanna for these great talks. And I think we can now open the Q&A session. So feel free to join, put your camera on and ask your question, or write it in the chat if you prefer. So yeah, the floor is yours.
Charlene, I just wanted to ask you, because also so that everybody knows that it's still recorded. So I'm wondering whether we want to do the discussion out of recording, or how do you plan? Because also so that everybody knows what's...
Yes, probably it would be best to stop the recording now, as we can have a Q&A session